people talk about go-to-market is the launch plan. And like, yes, launches are important, or releases, or however you want to slice and dice that, but it's just a moment in time. My definition is super simple. It is how we monetize the reason for the company's existence, or if you're in a multi-product company, the product's existence. It's business strategy. It's led by the CEO. It spans product and your revenue teams in marketing and sales, as well as post-sales with customer success and even professional services.
You are listening to This is Product Marketing, brought to you by Product Marketing Hive, the product marketing community that gives back. I'm your host, Louise Liu. Product Marketing Hive and this podcast are supported by Product Marketing Edge, a technology product marketing consulting firm. In this episode, Andrew Hatfield, VP of Product Marketing at Deepstar Strategic, shares his thoughts on a high-performance go-to-market playbook. Let's dive into it right now. Hi, Andrew. Welcome to the show.
How are you going? Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Great. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get into product marketing?
I think my journey into product marketing is probably a bit different from a lot of PMMs. One thing that is great is that there are so many paths. I actually started as a software developer, moved through software engineering, solution architecture, then into pre-sales and sales before landing in product marketing. And I've found that kind of like 360-degree view of B2B tech and its ecosystem in particular has been like invaluable. But regardless of my role, whether I was in tech or sales or product marketing, I've always been focused on the same thing. Like what problem are we actually solving? So I've looked at things through the lens of the end user or the buyer. And so I think this word is overused a little bit, but definitely it's a fanatical focus on what value are we delivering? Like, what is it the customer is trying to achieve? So that's definitely helped me progress my career. I've worked in small business, enterprise, startups. But the thing that really drew me to product marketing, I was at Red Hat, I was in a sales role, and I really wanted to be involved in building something. And so I thought the answer was product management. So I went after those sort of roles, and I ended up speaking to who ended up being my boss. And we're talking about what motivates me, where my passions and skills lie. And he's like, Andrew, with your focus on the market, the buyer, and the product, I really think you'd be better suited to product marketing. I'm like, no, Ed, I really want to build something. He's like, Andrew, I really think that product marketing's for you. So I got the hint, and he was right? Like, it's been great. You get to see a whole heap of different parts of the business. You get to have an impact, and we really are that glue, right? The great thing about product marketing is there's so many things that we can do and have an impact on. And so the biggest challenge is understanding, or first identifying, what things should happen and how do we prioritize that. And there's heaps of great product marketers. I think the thing that distinguishes a good product marketer from a great product marketer is knowing we should be focusing on this set of activities because they will drive these results, and that's what aligns to the business. So yeah, super passionate about getting things going and having a product marketing engine that drives a lot of these different components of a business.
That's great. That's great. Really great background. It's interesting. I've seen a lot of product marketers coming from sales engineering background or solution architect. Can you tell us a little bit more about this transition? How does the previous role prepare you to be a great product marketer?
I've seen the same, and I think it's a great path. I think in many cases it makes a lot of sense. The SE has already got those customer-facing skills. They understand the product or their industry domain. So there is a natural alignment there that has proven to be a successful path. For me, like I grew up, my parents owned software companies. My dad was the developer and the architect. My mum was the sales and marketing person. And so I grew up seeing both sides. And I've always thought in terms of first principles. Like in Australia, we used to have this science, kids educational show. And the guy's catchphrase was, "Why is it so?" That has got me into trouble so many times, but it's also what's enabled me to actually get the results. So thinking in first principles and foundational, ideas of what is it we're actually trying to achieve? What is going to work in this instance at this time for what we want to do? Because there's many ways to do things. And this is an observation that I have, is that a lot of B2B executives, and not to throw shade, but they don't know why they use a playbook. It's because that's what people are talking about on LinkedIn. It's because that's what they used in their previous role. It's because they read a white paper, right? A lot of people don't think in terms of the underlying principles, and that makes a huge difference. And so, back to your point about the SE, certainly in B2B sales, the sales engineer is the actual salesperson in most cases. Sadly, we see a lot of the reps or the AEs, I just do commercials, right? Or I book meetings and I do the paperwork and drive procurement. They're absolutely important and necessary, and the SE shouldn't be doing those things. But if it's only the SE that's able to identify a problem, quantify its pain and impact, and then articulate a value prop, well then, what's the AE doing? But like, they're kind of the things that product marketing does, right? Just in a different stage. So yeah, there's a lot of alignment there. That I was an SE for a while, in those pre-sales roles, and it's always been about like, what problem are we solving? Why does this problem matter? Because not every problem is worth solving, right? Just because it's painful for your staff, the staff feel it, they don't like it, but the business, and this goes back to financial metrics, right? Of, should I spend $1 million on this thing or that thing, right? And so how do we as vendors and product marketers articulate, well, why should you spend the money here? Well, the answer is because we solve this problem that has this quantifiable pain that you agree with, and this is the outcome, right? So that's kind of how I got here.
Before getting to this topic, give us a little bit like a background. How do you define go-to-market? Because I know a lot of product marketers have a slightly different definitions of their own. What's your definition?
Yeah, look, I agree that it is probably one of the most vague areas. In many cases, people talk about go-to-market as the launch plan. And like, yes, launches are important, or releases, or however you want to slice and dice that, but it's just a moment in time. My definition is super simple. It is how we monetize the reason for the company's existence, or if you're in a multi-product company, the product's existence. It's business strategy. It's led by the CEO. It spans product and your revenue teams in marketing and sales, as well as post-sales with customer success and even professional services. Like, every part of the execution across all of those teams, it needs to be tightly aligned to ensure that what we're doing at every stage is part of delivering on that promise of transformation to our customer. Like, what I see is most companies treat go-to-market as a collection of siloed efforts. So we've got marketing that runs campaigns, sales that does their thing, trying to close deals, and product focuses on features, and we get this factory, right? And so often we end up with, we see this everywhere: missed targets, bloated CAC, efficiency is out the window, we get disjointed customer experiences, and the customer never really achieves that transformation that we promised, right? And so I have found that true GTM starts with understanding why you exist, what transformation you uniquely enable. And then you need to align every function around delivering that transformation profitably and predictably, right? And they're difficult, right? So product needs to build features that support that transformation journey. Marketing creates conviction around that transformation. Sales guides customers towards those transformation outcomes. And customer success, their job is to ensure that the transformation actually happens, right? We see this all the time, that the sales process, like marketing sales, is great. And then, okay, cool, you've bought it now, I'm off to the next one. And okay, we might have some onboarding flows and things like that, but it's about product usage, right? It's not about actually getting the customer to reach that end goal, right? And that's still part of go-to-market, right? So I think about it in terms of it's horizontal execution across vertical functions, where everyone is focused on one thing: ensuring customers achieve the transformation that justifies why your company exists in the first place. And when that happens, consistently and efficiently, we've monetized the reason of why we're here.
That's very clear. That's a really good definition. Tell us a little bit more about the background. What challenges did you discover or notice that you feel like there is need for this structured framework?
Yeah, right. Like the biggest gap that I've observed is that most companies are in what I call disconnected chaos, right? The foundational belief that marketing gets leads, sales closes them, right? We see this everywhere, right? Even in teams that are quite healthy, right? And this creates systemic GTM efficiency erosion, right? Where companies will spend 80% more effort for the same results, like even HubSpot, right? They went and spent an extra $500 million for an 8% bump in ARR. And they're a good company, right? They know what they're doing. So if a company like that is struggling, most others are not as good as HubSpot, right? In terms of execution, right? So I've looked at this and I've gone through, my experience. I've spoken to a lot of people. I've worked, either in-house or, from a Deepstar perspective across a lot of customers. And we've mapped this into a maturity model with 5 distinct levels from zero, disconnected chaos, all the way to level 4, which is a compounding GTM system. Most companies are trapped between levels 0 and 2, and the symptoms, they're predictable, right? Like we see this all the time, right? At level 0, CAC payback often exceeds 24 months, or it's unmeasured, right? GTM efficiency ratio are above 1, meaning I'm spending more than I'm getting back. So I might spend $1.20 and only get 80 cents back, right? Each team runs their own playbook and there's no shared buyer model. And the prevailing mindset, is, we're doing sales and marketing. Why isn't it working? So we have this progression challenge where companies, as they learn and they want to mature and scale, they want to jump directly to level 4 where the GTM is their strategic advantage. Right? That's where you want to be. Things where payback periods are under 9 months and efficiency ratios are, at 0.5, meaning that, I get $2 back for every dollar I spend. But it's difficult to jump levels, right? And so three gaps really emerge, right? First is the activity trap. Teams are busy measuring work, right? So there's MQLs, calls made, features shipped, rather than looking at the buyer progression and business outcomes. Secondly, we optimize for functional over systems thinking. So marketing optimizes for leads or sales for pipeline, product for features, but nobody is really optimizing for the customer's transformation journey. And thirdly, many times we're missing diagnostic capabilities, right? Companies generally can't accurately assess their current maturity level or identify the specific breakthrough needed to move, and progress. So the framework essentially, it came about because I kept seeing the same patterns. Companies implementing level 3 tactics while they're still operating on level 1 systems, and then wondering why they can't actually take advantage of those sophisticated strategies. Like, why don't they work? Right. So again, it goes back to thinking, fundamentally, why is it so, and understanding what are we actually trying to achieve. And it's a bit like you've got to learn how to walk before you run.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's talk about playbook. Can you walk us through some key principles or pillars of your high performance go-to-market playbook?
Yeah, right. So this has been built because of my background across tech sales and marketing, and it is in no way the only way to grow. Right, there are lots of ways to grow. What I've found, however, is that those unicorns, right, Zoom during COVID took off in large part because of its simplicity and its name. Right, it's a bit like Slack me, Google me, jump on a Zoom. No one wanted to WebEx. Right. Then I look at some of these AI, unicorns that have taken off with, 10, 50, 100 million in months. They're amazing, but not everyone's like that. So for the vast majority that sit in the middle of that bell curve, what they need is a predictable, systematic approach, right? And so that does rest on 3 foundational pillars. The first one is a compelling narrative. So we use narrative design as a framework, and it's not necessarily category creation, but it's about creating a compelling story about the unique transformation that you help customers achieve. So it's not about positioning or differentiation, like they feed into it. It's about creating distinction. So you're not trying to be better than your competitors. What you're trying to do is establish yourself as uniquely positioned to deliver a specific transformation outcome. The second pillar is around proprietary data strategy. So using a mix of zero, first, and third-party data that informs both product development and your go-to-market execution, right? So this creates, the unique insights that fuel your distinct point of view. For example, one customer engagement platform that I work with, they use product usage data to identify behavioral patterns that predict expansion. And so they are insights that their competitors just don't have, right? But that's of value to them building product and to marketing and sales, but also to the end customer, right? So because of the nature of what they do, that folds into helping them helping their customers achieve that transformation. And the third pillar that kind of wraps around all of this is a modern go-to-market, right? It's about a horizontal execution with company-wide ownership. Obviously, you need to be AI enabled for efficiency and capability, and you need alignment around the buyer journey stages rather than departmental functions. And so it's the CEO, not the CMO or the VP of sales, that owns GTM success, right? That's difficult, right? The real challenge is, naturally as humans, we coalesce around shared identity. And so that's why we've got a marketing department and a product department. And then certainly in B2B tech, we have performance marketing, brand marketing. Like, oh my goodness, right? But that's how we organize. That's got nothing to do with the customer, right? And so we need to think in terms of how is the customer progressing through their journey, but we're not going to go and upend, organizational structures overnight. So, horizontal virtual pods is a great way to achieve that in our current environment. And so, from the predictability perspective, these pillars, they work together to create distinction, not just differentiation. So, a great transformation story without unique data insights just becomes generic positioning, or data without a compelling narrative doesn't transfer conviction, right? So you need both, for modern execution so that you can scale that distinct value that you deliver.
So let's break it down one by one. So in the first pillar is about this narrative. This is in itself is already really big topic, but give us a little bit like quick digest. What are the good tips or best practices that you have that product marketers can take away in this episode?
So a couple of things, right? So you need to use the buyer language. So you need to understand, walk a mile in their shoes. You need to understand what their world is like. Now, so this is where SEs moving into product marketing is great, because often SEs were actually that role in the customer land, right? So there's a lot of connectivity there, but you really do need to understand your customer. So market research, I am fanatically religious about first party insights. Yes, zero party, third party, both good, but I need to be able to, like, what happened that caused you to go and look for a solution like this? Like, what was the trigger? Why now? How much is this impacting you? So using jobs to be done and first party insights for market research is core, and making it around their language, right? We often get caught up in product speak or features, or B2B tech in particular loves buzzwords, and everyone wants to be big and important and serious, and there's no personality. So that's another part, is let that personality shine, whatever that is, right? Obviously has to relate to your customer. But we use a combination of the 5 stages of awareness with narrative design, and we've expanded that more than the what's happening in the world, like why, what are those new rules that you need to succeed, why it's hard, what we've built, and why now. So we've expanded that so that there's more bridge between those things. And while not all of those pieces surface in the actual story, that's really the thing that makes the big difference in being able to create a compelling story. Because narrative design is awesome, but often I find that there's a big disconnect between a marketing narrative and the story that sales tells, right? In a sales meeting, they can't sit there and speak for 5 to 10 minutes talking about Mary having a problem and why Sue is not helping her, right? That doesn't work, right? So probably the biggest lesson, we facilitate the conversation. We do not answer the questions, right? You need to have your key executives, typically no more than 4 at most, ideally 3, that are part of this conversation, but they really need to know the market, the problem, the customer, right? If you don't have that, what are you doing anyway, right? Like a generic sales leader, great. You might be fantastic at managing a sales team, it doesn't mean that you deeply understand the thing that you're actually doing, right? So that's important.
So for the second step, the narrative has to be rooted in data, backed by data. From your personal experience, what are the traps or missteps that people could run into?
Right? There's a lot of correlation without causation. And in many cases, it's hard. Most of the time, you don't have enough volume of data to be able to do like statistical analysis. Oh, wish that we could, right? So again, understanding that biopsychology, right? So behavioral science is a great tool. Jobs to be done are great tools. Trying to understand not just why things happened, and sometimes just recognizing that you're not going to be able to determine that definitively, right? You might have a hypothesis and you test it, and maybe you've got three potentials. Understanding that you're not necessarily going to have enough data for everything, right? So don't try and over optimize things, but that's right. But also look at the bigger picture, right? Often we see people will optimize for a particular component, and the best example is someone running campaigns will optimize for the lowest cost per click, right? To be like really specific and basic, and or the highest click-through rate, right? Okay, that makes sense when I'm looking at this one thing, right? And I'm optimizing performance for that one component. But what you might find out is that those people that have a propensity to click your ad, for example, or fill in a form, aren't necessarily the ones that convert to revenue, right? So this is the same when I look at go-to-market performance overall, needing to have top-down metrics, and you combine leading and lagging, but also we often, this is again just human nature, that we often define success through bottom-up departmental views, right? Okay, yes, I want efficient click-through rates, right? Or cost per click, obviously. But if none of them actually convert to a meeting or a qualified opportunity or to revenue, well, who cares if it's 50% cheaper if none of them actually convert? So understanding the bigger picture and working backwards, right? So let's take cost per click again, right? If I'm looking at that from a forward perspective, I'm not guaranteed to be optimizing for the outcome I'm actually trying to achieve. If I start with, okay, who are our best customers, our best users, however you measure that, is it an NRR, is it in usage, is it stickiness, like, is it how will they rave about you, like whatever you define as the ideal gold standard for a perfect customer, what do they look like, right? Reverse engineer their journey. Like, where did they come from? Maybe they were their cost per click or their cost of acquisition is 3 times higher than the others, but their churn rate is 2% versus a churn rate of 80%. Well, which one do I want to optimize for? So again, that's where I go back to, what problem are you actually trying to solve? And we're all trained to be good at the thing that we do. And so there's all this pressure, right? Again, to use cost per click as an example, that needs to be as low as possible. Like, Frank, why is it so high? Well, I'm not optimizing for cost per click. I'm optimizing for qualified opportunities, right?
Let's talk about measuring the success. Earlier you said depends on the maturity of the company. You probably have different things you want to measure, but to its bare bone, regardless of the maturity, what are the essential go-to-market metrics that you think every product marketer should track?
Yeah, so again, it depends on what stage you're at, and not necessarily just in terms of like aligning to our GTM maturity model, but if I'm a Series A seed, early stage startup, my business goals are going to be around acquisition, right? I need to go and prove, right, what I'm doing has market fit, not just product fit, but market fit. That's very different to if I'm a Series C, I'm a public company, I'm an enterprise, I'm a Fortune 500 organization. The problems are vastly different, right? And so you have to decide what to measure based on where you are, because again, if I go and start applying a rule of 40 or NRR to an early stage company, that makes no sense. Like even CAC payback for early stage probably is a bit too advanced. So I might start looking at, well, what is my conversion ratio? What are when I'm talking to a prospect and I'm using my story, are they nodding along? Right. Some of these are like essentially what soft metrics, but is the story resonating? Right. So yes, you should have gone and done a message test before you launch this, right? But you might not have had the time or the money to do so. So when you're talking to a prospect and you're using particular words and language and you're describing what you are claiming the world is like and the change, are they agreeing with you? Right? Are they sitting there going, "Oh, Louise, like you clearly know, like, have you done this before?" Right? So you're looking for that buy-in, right, at the early stage. Um, as you progress, then you start to think about, okay, well, what what is my CAC payback, right? Yes, CAC is important, but a high CAC isn't necessarily bad. But if my payback is more than 24 months, or what we're seeing at the minute is blowing out, past 45 months, that's years, right? You are never going to recover from that. You do not have a profitable business, right? So, if and then I think about, like, there's CAC, there's NRR, CAC payback is a good triangle to measure. It's not the only one, but it's a really simple. They all have a relationship, and so if my CAC is high but my NRR is high, my CAC payback is probably going to be pretty good, right? But if my NRR is low and my CAC is high, well, I've probably got a churn problem, so my CAC payback is going to get blown out the water. Like, obviously, there's a lot more to this that we'd look at in detail, but from a directional perspective, that's how we look at things in terms of the actual outcome that we're affecting. And if I think about this from a growth stage business, right, which is where we spend most of our time, right, we look at the business and then we say, okay, so the metric is showing this particular range. For a company like you, that's good, that's bad. But when combined with another metric, those two things, like, what that's telling us is you don't have a conversion problem, you have a conviction problem. Or you don't have a story problem, like, people like what you're saying, but you can't get expansion. So maybe we should look at pricing, or maybe we should look at packaging. Maybe the problem is around onboarding and value realization. So we use business metrics and what stage you're at aligned to our growth, our maturity model, to identify what programs that we should initiate. Because, like, it's good to look at financial metrics and revenue and performance, but that doesn't necessarily translate. And this is the big gap that we see is most companies, they either don't know what's working, what's not working, and why. And so they're like, I don't know what to do. And so they try lots of stuff, but they don't know why. So that's the first principles fundamental thinking. Or they've got a really good idea. And let's say they're right. Like, I think the problem is this. But then they go, okay, well, I know I've got all these tools. Which one do I choose? Right. And so, is it a messaging problem? Is it a positioning problem? Is it a sales enablement problem? Is it an onboarding problem? Right. That isn't necessarily obvious. Right. And so that's, where our knowledge and data has enabled our go to market. Right.
Before we go, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, look, everyone's talking about the impact of AI. I think, yes, that's real. I do see most AI is just a wrapper around ChatGPT. We've been building some actual, fundamental AI systems underneath, both for our customers and internally. And yes, it is blowing my mind what we can do. This is from a technology, a market, a civilization perspective. It is amazing and terrifying at the same time. So, if I think just about product marketing, it really is at an inflection point. Now is our time to shine, right? Companies really need to invest in product marketing, right? We are not the group that you go get rid of, right? So the traditional approach of optimizing individual functions, doesn't work, right? Companies that thrive will be those that integrate product, marketing, sales, customer success around buyer journeys and those stages rather than departmental boundaries. So 3 key takeaways: focus on business outcomes, not activity metrics. Become data literate and distinction focused, and think systematically, right? Like those 3 pillars, the compelling narrative, the proprietary data, and a modern GTM, they work together to create a sustainable, predictable growth engine, right? The opportunity is massive. So have some fun and own it.
Thank you for sharing your insights with us today. This is great.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. And if anyone's got any questions or want to chat about this further, just hit me up on LinkedIn.
Thank you for tuning in to This is Product Marketing, brought to you by Product Marketing Hive, a product marketing community that gives back. Check out our website, productmarketinghive.com, to join our community, meet fellow product marketers, and access free resources. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe and give a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. See you next time.